I'm just going to start by handing it back to Fran to just share a little bit about Joan. And I know you already mentioned you met in 1994, but a little bit about how you met and your life together.
Sure. So, well, we met because we were both in education. Joan was both a teacher of young children and a senior leadership administrator at the Bank Street College of Education in New York for most of her adult life. And I was a faculty member and administrator here in Western Mass at Smith College. So that's how we met. And then Joan moved up here to join me in Northampton in 1995. And we just had we thought we were the luckiest people alive. Joan was so engaged and loved everybody, and loved to garden and loved to travel and loved to cook and loved her life, as did I. And in 2015, we moved from the house that we lived in town out to a small independent living retirement community where I still live. You can see it here on the slides. And Joan again made all kinds of friends here, and it's a community based on Quaker values. It's not a Quaker community, but it has those values of caring and deep community in it. So there we are. Should I go ahead and yeah?
Sure. Thank you. I would
Right.
I would love to get into the kind of beginning of the book, herself to the end, and Joan's initial dementia diagnosis and how you all responded to that.
Right. So in 2013, Joan had a little tiny stroke. It didn't amount to much. She made a very complete recovery, but she was under the care of people at Mass General Hospital, now called Mass General Brigham, and they wanted to see her every 6 months, and we couldn't figure out why. And after a few of those visits, they wanted to do some psychological testing, and Joan was then said to have MCI, mild cognitive impairment. And then some more testing and an MRI and various other both neurological and psychological tests with clear progression. And she said to me at one point, she said, "Franny, I think I'm losing my mind." And I said, "Oh, no. Everybody our age has MCI. Don't worry about that. You're fine." I just couldn't do it. So then COVID came, and we were doing our doctor's visits virtually. And the doctor came on and said, "Joan, you have Alzheimer's." Mm-hmm. And I just remember that we were both kind of paralyzed by this. It's such a horrendous diagnosis. We didn't know, all I could think of to say is, I'm going to take care of you. And so there it was. And then when we kind of caught ourselves, we began to sort of talk about, what are we going to do? And the first thing was, I'm just going to keep you at home. That's the way it's going to be. And we kind of learned that doesn't always work, especially as the disease progresses. It's not possible always to do that. So then we went and visited some nursing homes. And Joan didn't want any part of any of it, even though we have some good nursing homes around here. And at the same time, she was going down another road in which she said, "Franny, I can't bear to lose myself." I can't bear to lose myself. What am I without myself? Mm-hmm. And so she finally made the decision that she wanted to end her life. She did not want to go down that long Alzheimer's road. And so then we started trying to think about what that might mean. And of course, the first thing we did was to look into medical aid in dying, which we do not have in Massachusetts. But even if we did, people with a dementia diagnosis do not qualify for medical aid in dying. They have more than 6 months to live, and they have to be cognitively capable, all this stuff. She would not have qualified. So then I went on the web and I started looking all over the place because I do that sort of stuff. And, I said to her, well, Joan, we could go to Europe. I could take you to Europe. She said, why would I do that? I don't want to go to Europe. I want to die right here in my own home with my friends around me. So then, meanwhile, she was talking to people about her Alzheimer's, unlike most people. She was going around our community saying, listen, I have Alzheimer's. And people didn't know how to respond to that, of course. However, very odd things began to happen. Somebody said, have you got pills? You can take pills. And then a doctor friend we knew said, watch it. If you could end up in a permanent vegetative state if you do that. So we threw out the pills. And then somebody came along and said, my son can get you fentanyl off the street. And Joan said, oh, good God, no. That would be breaking the law. So, there was, and she was kind of clarifying her own values at the same time. She wanted to die at home. She wanted to do something legal. She wanted to be with those who loved her. And so finally we learned somewhere along the way about voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. And at first we thought, oh, that sounds terrible. But as we learned more about it, we got brought from kind of the outside, what you first hear, into the inside where you have really looked into it. And discovered that it's not at all as you first thought. And I think on that note, I should toss the ball to Dr. Z.
Yeah, Dr. Z, I would love if you could get into a little bit about what VSED is and what that process means for people.
Glad to. Well, Fran highlighted one thing: VSED and medical aid in dying MAID are not the same. Although they share certain parts, in general, VSED is something that we can look at as legal in 50 states. There's nothing that needs to go through a legislature to make it so. It's already there. Ethically, most people, most ethicists included, agree that VSED is compassionate and legal and without ethical problem. So that's a really big step. If you can check all those boxes, people tend to be more relaxed and say, this is something that I might consider. It's something also that the person is totally in control of. They do need support, and Fran can later on get into some of the support, and Carol was part of the support that made it possible because you want to be comfortable throughout the process. What I've found in my maybe 20 years now of seeing patients with VSAD is that it's not uncomfortable for most people. The biggest problem is when someone has a dry mouth, what do you do about it without drinking water, without drinking liquid? And you just use a mouth swab. Some people I've taken care of would take a sip and then spit it out in a cup. So as long as you don't take more water into your system, your body is going through the process that's natural at the end of most people's lives, where you get dehydrated. And the other name for VSAD in my mind is dehydration, medical dehydration. Food is important too, but the water, the liquid is the key. And as I look at people going through this, they always ask, well, how long will it take? In general, I've seen almost everybody die within 2 weeks. I have had one person that lived for 3 weeks, but they had a little bite to eat once or twice, and they had a little bit to drink once or twice. But it didn't stop the process. They still followed through, and they died within 3 weeks. Most people within 2 weeks have a period of time where they're just talking and connecting with everybody and enjoying their life and connecting with people that love them.
Thank you,
That's about
Dr.
the first 5 days.
Yeah.
After which people start to get sleepier, and you're on and off with napping the next several days. And then the last few days, you really don't wake up. You just are asleep. And at times somebody might be stiff and achy in bed. So having hospice is very useful because they know about all the medicines for comfort, and they can give you medicines such as a little bit of morphine in a liquid that goes in your mouth, or a little bit of Ativan that helps you if you're tense and very nervous, or you just want to take a nap. So that's pretty much the process. You need to have people around you 24/7 so that if you have a problem, if you have a discomfort, somebody knows about it right away.
Thank you, Dr. Z. I appreciate that overview. Um, I would love to get into a few questions for Fran and Carol, if you could jump in here about your first reaction when you learned about Joan's decision and how your feelings changed over time as you learned more about the process.
Carol, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on that one because while I was quite honored to be invited to be close into the process and part of the team, I did not understand that. I did not understand really why I was invited. I know I was a close friend of Joan's, but I actually believed that the reason I was invited to be part of it was to slow everything down and remind people, life is great and you don't need to leave. And it took someone else on the team to kind of take me aside and say, you shouldn't be on this team if that's your belief, because we're here to help Joan follow through on what she's chosen to do. So I really had to move from being outside the process to inside. And that was a process for me. But I will say that it was a life-changing process for me to be close into what happened and how it went in a way that has continued to give me a lot of power in my life to it has reduced my anxiety about the last chapter of life, however that may go for me.
Maybe I should say here that when Joan finally made her decision, my response to that was, oh my God, I need help. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to help her. And that's how we got this core group that Carol talked about being in the group. Joan chose 4 very, very dear old friends. And we asked them to walk with us as our support group through this. And I don't know what I would have done without them. They were all here during the time. There was never a time when there weren't at least 2 of us in the house.
Fran, to go to the book for a second, could you talk about the fact that there are multiple authors in the book, and that decision for you, and why you decided to include those voices, including Carol's?
Absolutely. Yes. So we had no intention of writing a book at the time, but afterwards, we all felt as if somehow our lives had been transformed by this, as Carol has already told you. And so we decided we really needed to write this down for people, that we could share this experience. And also the practical parts of it that we learned as we went along. People, we had no idea where to start, so people just started writing stuff. And sooner or later, I thought, well, why am I trying to integrate this? Let's let each person have her own voice. And so the book materialized. There was one additional voice, which was my son, Tom, who came aboard and kind of became a core group member on his own as time went by. So the book is multiple voices, and you get to hear everybody. And it started about 8 months before she actually did VSAD. We were meeting on Zoom every month. So, and Joan joined those meetings too. So we had ample opportunity to share our concerns and our hopes and Joan's feelings. Joan was so determined. She was so clear about what she wanted to do. So the core group turned out to be just such a gift for us.
Thank you, Fran. Yeah, if you could elaborate a little bit on why that support system was so important, specifically for the VSAD experience, and how that actually relates to palliative medicine.
Yeah. During VSAD, there were always a couple of us, as I said, in the house. And the thing about VSAD is that all of the caring is palliative. People have said to me, how could you help her die? And the answer is, we did not help her die. None of us helped her die. We helped her to die peacefully and surrounded by love. And that was true. We went out, we expanded this support system. Our doctor of many years came aboard to help. He agreed to help. We went to hospice, the same hospice that Jeff works at now. And they agreed to help. So we had hospice there, and all of us were doing palliative care. And Joan was very much with us during the first 4 or 5 days, and then she mostly slept.
Thanks for sharing that, Fran. So I have another question about VSAD, which is something that struck me in the book was all of the planning, all of the logistical pieces, and all of the planning that it took to support Joan. And I'm wondering, Carol, Dr. Z, Fran, if you have any thoughts about the importance of that planning process and that support network that you had.
I'd love to get a comment in on that. What I've seen is that Fran and her friends had the very best support network I've ever seen. They thought about it, they talked about it for quite a while before VSAD ever started. And then through the VSAD, they were there for each other. The idea that there's always a couple people in the home is great. So nobody felt alone, unsupported. You add to that some professional support, such as hospice, and now you have a very, very good system to help anybody, not just the patient, but the whole support team. As I see other people go through this, some people do it with just one person, and it takes an awful lot out of that person, but with enough determination, they're able to do it, usually again with supportive hospice. So it's the support the most that you can get together, the most discussion you can have. And you started to talk about the idea of being, Carol said, being brought into the inside of that. And I'll steal your thunder, Fran, and say that is the concept I love the most of your book. Somebody outside doesn't understand what's going on. They might be fearful. They might be angry at the idea of VSAD. And by having conversation, you bring them into the inside and they become good support.
I would add that Joan herself did not reveal how frightened she was until she met one of the team, Alyson, who has assisted people at the end of their lives and who assured her that this would be a beautiful adventure. And Joan reported to us, I'm going to be fine through this because Alyson has opened a door for her about what to expect and how to cherish those last days. And she really did. We saw her really enjoy her last days of being alive and conscious fully.
Thank you, Carol. And Allison was her death doula, is that correct? Okay. Yes. I would love to get into another question about the book, herself to the end, which I have it sitting right next to me. I had to do a little show and tell moment. But it's another question about Joan, and I would love to talk about Joan's personality and how I know that she was a writer, correct? So, how her personality and the energy she brought to life informed writing the book and the decision to write the book.
Carol, would you like to start?
Sure. A very fortunate piece of the way Joan's mind was changing is that her writing part seemed to be intact really far into, she was still writing with us, coming onto a Zoom, figuring out the logistics of coming onto a Zoom, which was not easy for her. But once she was writing and what she wrote was lucid and flowing, and she was able to access that skill right to the end. And I think that was just one of the lucky pieces of many lucky things that happened. But I think over and over about how she would feel about having this book out in the world. I think she would just be so proud and so gratified that she was able to share this in this way.
One of the things about Joan was that, I mean, we've all talked about her determination. And the thing about VSAD is you have to go before you're ready. There's this concept that I've seen in the literature called 5 minutes to midnight. You have to be cognitively capable in order to do VSAD, because nobody else can make that decision for you. You have to make it on your own, and you have to be able to sustain it on your own. So Joan totally understood this, and she was willing to give up, even though she loved her life. She was willing to give up some good days, good months, in order to not have many more bad days down the road. And she brought us all in to walk with her through all that while she was still capable. And I want to say just a little thing about our retirement community. I didn't want to have food in the house because I thought, that seems like a terrible thing that she would wake up in the morning and smell coffee. She thought I was silly. But a guy down the street, this is like 2 houses, gave us his house. so the core group people could go down there and eat and put their feet up. And then our whole Lathrop community residents came and started bringing food and taking care of us. And then they had a vigil every evening for half an hour where they sat in silence at the meeting house. There were all these levels of support. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how fortunate we were. That everything seemed to work so well. The doctor said yes and hospice said yes. That's not necessarily the way it always happens. And the community came together, and the core group was so there for us and my son Tom. It was an amazing experience, and it has left me just overwhelmed with gratitude. Not only about the life we had, but about how things went for Joan, and how she got to be herself to the end, and how proud I am of her.
Thank you, Fran. That's really a beautiful, beautiful reflection. I was going to jump a little bit to a question about your own perspective about death and dying, just to kind of meld into what you were saying. And Dr. Z or Carol, feel free to jump in as well. But how your perspective about death and dying in general has changed from Joan's experience and from the collaboration on the book after her death.
Okay, should I begin?
Sure.
Well, I've had a couple of people have gotten in touch with me after they've read the book, and they've said the book leaves me feeling with a kind of peace, because I now know that I don't have to endure extended, horrible suffering at the end of my life. I don't have to do that. I feel that way myself. I think it's a gift. It's I don't know what really more I can say, except that I'm very clear about how we all live and we all die and we come and go. And I'm going to do that in the not too distant future. I'm 90 years old. And I feel very peaceful about it, partly as a result of what Joan did.
I'd like to say that that I learned so much from Joan, from how deliberate she was and how determined she was. I was also experiencing the progressing dementia of my father right at the same time that Joan was making these plans. And my father was a scientist who was loved his life and loved trying to figure out what was happening to him as it was happening. And I didn't see any reason for that process to be interrupted. So that was part of the dilemma that I was in. As Joan was moving toward her deliberate plans to die, my father was just watching what was happening to him, having his good days, having his bad days. But his bad days got more and more frequent. I started to see him frightened and not able to recognize the people he loved the most, being confused and not feeling safe. And I started to see his body just become inoperable to him. He couldn't make his body move in the way that he wanted to move. And having those contrasting situations was a very intense experience for me. And I would say that I came away feeling that there is an enormous amount of luck involved in how we make our exit. You can have the best plans in the world and the best team in the world and the best doctors and advisors in the world, and it might not go the way you want it to go. But it's certainly not going to go the way you want it to go if you tell no one what you're thinking about and you don't trade notes with the people that you love about what you want. And you have a better chance of being able to have dignity and peace and serenity if you think and talk about these things with the people you trust the most. So that's where my passionate interest is following Joan's death, is to keep that message going out to people who might want to know about it. Might not be their cup of tea, but maybe it is, you know.
Wonderful. I would add that from a professional point of view, there are so many medical providers in the country that don't really know about VSED. They've heard about medical aid in dying. Most people in medicine are a little bit afraid of the idea. Like, how could you do that? Isn't life worth so much? But I think my message to other physicians, nurse practitioners, and PAs is it's a valid option, and it's one that I would look to also if my life goes in some direction that I feel I need to stop living. I think it's easy enough to do. You just want to have support, and as long as I have people around me to hold my hand, make sure I'm comfortable, I can get through that. It's certainly not the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. There's so many other things much harder.
Thanks, Dr. Z.
Yeah, Joan said to me about the third day of her VSAD. She said, you know, Franny, this is not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be.
And
Mm.
Joan was a foodie. She loved her food.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
Oh, was she ever? She was an Italian foodie. She knew every pasta shape in the world. Another place where this has left me, about building on what Carol just said, is uh, now in my retirement community, my goal is for everybody to be sure they have a healthcare proxy, and that they have an advanced directive. And Compassionate Choices, of course, has all the material you need to do that. I didn't know about that at the beginning, but I certainly do now. And it's just so important that we all make our wishes clear as we go along.
Thank you, Fran. Oh, sorry, my internet was lagging for a second. I think I'm back. Um, I know we are going to get into some audience questions, and there are quite a few, so I think I'm going to start transitioning there. But before we get into audience questions, I'm sorry, I'm afraid that my internet is lagging. My last kind of question for all of you before we hop into the Q&A would just be if you have anything else that you would like to leave the Compassion and Choices community with, that you haven't mentioned, or any final thoughts that we didn't get to in these questions.
I would love to add one more thing about the professional side. Fran, you were so lucky to have somebody, your physician, who would say, well, of course I'll support you. Not everybody has that. And if that's the case, you have a tough decision to say, do I try to convince this person? And it may take, ongoing discussion to help your physician come to the inside of your team, or jump ship and say, I need somebody else. I need somebody else who can see this properly. And again, I would put in the word for hospice, because hospice medical directors understand end of life. They understand comfort and support. And that's what hospice is all about. Not all hospices have experience with VSED, but more likely you would have people that are understanding.
I might say one thing. Joan, at one point, the question was, when is she going to do it? We talked a little about the window. She said to me at one point, well, I think I'm going to start the VSAD right after my birthday in September. This caught me entirely off guard. And I said, oh, no, Joan, no, it's way too soon. And then somebody else who knew about all of this said to me, Fran, you better be careful that you don't cause her to miss her window. And I realized that I had to just back off about this timing thing. I couldn't do that. So she went to our wonderful doctor who had been our doctor for all those years. And she and he figured out the timing, which was a gift for me, and for her too.
I see a note in the chat about timing and involvement of hospice. The 6 months. How does a hospice that is going to support someone going through VSED get around the 6 months, having 6 months left? Maybe Dr. Z, you could say a few words about that.
Oh boy, thank you for noticing and asking. 6 months of prognosis, that's something that was set up in the 80s when Congress said there ought to be a hospice benefit. They had to come up with a number, and they equated that with terminal illness. There's nothing magic about 6 months. Hospices have more leeway. There are people that may stay on hospice more than 6 months. They're just declining slower. VSAD is the opposite. Somebody's going to decline much faster, despite anybody's prediction, when they stop eating and drinking. So if you have congestive heart failure or kidney disease or a cancer or any diagnosis, Alzheimer's, as soon as you stop eating and drinking, your prognosis is vastly less than 6 months. In my estimation, somebody can come onto my hospice if I know that they're going to start VSAD and I would defend that in a court of law. It is their right to do it, and hospice has the ability to, take care of them right away.
Thanks, Dr. Z. Okay, I can moderate some of the questions coming through in the chat and hopefully answer a few of them. We should be able to get to some, but not all, and hopefully we can address some of the more logistical questions in our follow-up email to everyone. I want to start with a little bit of a question about art, because we are in an arts and culture webinar, and writing is art, in my opinion. So someone asked in the chat, and I think this is an interesting question. Do you feel art can expand consciousness and alleviate fear of death? So maybe we can talk about that in the context of writing herself to the end, or just writing in general.
I am a huge believer in art as a vehicle to know oneself better. And when you know yourself better, you have a lot more choices about what you're going to do, where you're going to go, how quickly you're going to do what you're going to do next. And it's an expansion of the self to move into any kind of art form. So I think it's an exceedingly useful vehicle at any time of life.
Thank you, Carol. And if anyone has read herself to the end or gets a chance, it does read sometimes in like a almost journal format, or it's really personal. So I think, Carol, that's a good point of the importance of writing. So thank you. Fran, did you have anything to add about
I was just going to add that for Joan, Joan was a writer. And she was also an avid reader. The very words herself to the end came from Joan's reading of Virginia Woolf, who said, "Who am I without myself?" And Joan had read deeply all her life and reflected on what she read. I mean, she had gone through death 1,000 times in her reading, in her own life. In addition to that, she was an avid photographer. And such an observer of her world, such an observer of nature. And we would walk together, and she would say, those leaves look different from the way they did yesterday on that tree. She took in her world in such deep ways. And I think it helped her to see her place in it and see her journey.
And someone asked the question about did Joan have at the end of her life a sort of urgency and pressure to finish projects? And the answer is absolutely yes. And one of them was she had taken a lot of photographs of the Lathrop community, the people, other people in her neighborhood, and she really wanted to label all those photographs and get them to the right people. And Fran, you can, if you'd like, to say something about her essay collection at the end of her life.
Yeah, she wrote this book. That is, she and with a lot of help from Carol and me. But she did all the writing. There's no question about that. But oh my God, she would write something and then she'd lose it on her computer. And she couldn't find it. And she would be calling me in and saying, "I just wrote this essay and it's gone." And we discovered that she had 4 different desktops on her computer later on. But finally I printed everything out and we put them all over the floor. And she then tried to organize what she wanted where. So she did the writing and the rest of us did. I was called her support network or something. But she got it done, and she was, and the name of it, by the way, the name of it was Out of My Mind, which has a double meaning for sure.
Thank you, Fran. That's amazing. Okay, there are a few questions that I think could be addressed, that we could probably address kind of quickly. So a few questions came in about death doulas, and maybe Fran, you could talk about how you found out about getting a death doula and what that kind of meant to you in this journey.
Yes, at the retirement community where I live, the person that we were able to get to come had already helped. We knew her already. She had helped some other residents at the ends of their lives. And she had just a beautiful touch, a beautiful relationship with Joan. I think, as Carol kind of already said, Joan never told me how frightened she was, but she did tell Alyson. And Alyson calmed her in a way that only she could. After which Joan said, I don't feel frightened anymore." What a gift that was. So, and she came 4 hours a day every morning from 9 to 1. And that's the only outside help we had, except for the hospice, wonderful hospice nurses, and our core group. And it was kind of perfect for all the needs that we had.
Thank you, Fran. That actually kind of leads into, I think that the death doula or getting a death doula is one answer to this question, which is if you have any recommendations or ideas for solo agers, people who might not have a vast support network. And I think death doulas is a great answer to that question. And we can provide resources in the follow-up email about that. So,
Death doula plus hospice.
yes, thank you. Another question we have in the chat here, and that I would love to talk about is, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, but how each of you is preparing for your own end of life experience and what that kind of has meant for you.
I think I kind of already did that, but maybe we should allow the others a chance to do that.
I'm having conversations mostly with my husband and writing things down. We're quite well aware that we could change our minds tomorrow, but we're trying very hard to tell each other what we want and under what conditions we would want something else, and putting that in writing and making it clear to our healthcare proxies. That's what we're doing.
That's perfect, Carol. That's exactly what you want to do. I've had conversations with my family, with my wife. Most people don't want to hear about these things. They're saying, well, why are you bringing this up? You look pretty good right now. Aren't you healthy? Is there something you haven't told me? And I just want people to understand. Even my physician, when I went to fill out the second form that you need, besides the healthcare proxy, it's the medical aid in dying form. I should say medical orders for life-sustaining treatment instead, excuse me. And Massachusetts has one, almost all states have one. It tells what level of care you would want if you were in certain situations, but it's very brief. So what Carol, you were mentioning is write down the kind of things that you want and don't want. And again, Compassionate Choices has advanced directives, the very thing you want to write your ideas and your thoughts. What do you value? What would you like to avoid? And have that all written down. Doctors are only, and EMS is only mandated to follow either yourself, your healthcare proxy, or the orders in the medical orders for life-sustaining treatment form. However, the advanced directives do inform physicians taking care of you. And once they read things like that, they go, oh, now I get it. Now I see why you wouldn't want to have that or this treatment.
Thank you, Dr. Z.
Could I add that, this is all of this is to empower us to make the choices that we want for the ends of our lives, rather than falling into a situation in which somebody else is making all of those choices. We're talking here about VSAD, and it's a choice that I certainly might make, and others sounds as if they might as well. But the really important thing throughout this is choice. I think it was this writer Susan Sontag who said, I don't want to die. I mean, bring on the tubes, bring on the ICU, just keep me alive. She gets to do that. And that's one of the wonderful things really about what we're talking about, is that we hope to empower each of us to put down in advance what it is we really want for ourselves, so that we have a chance of the medical establishment and others following up on that as we would wish.
And
it's such a powerful thing.
And we want people to know that VSED is legal in all 50 states,
Yeah.
and is one of the choices, and is a comfortable, dignified way. Just one of the array.
Thank you, Carol. And thank you, Fran. Thank you so much. I would love it, Gathoe, if we could put up the slides that explain where to find the book. And there are a few photos that I would love to share of Joan and of Fran. I know we didn't get a chance to do that towards the beginning. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. So as we're wrapping up here, and I think I'm going to hand it over to Gothoe in a minute, just wanted to share a few photos. And Fran, if you have any kind of final reflections about your experience or anything else you'd
This
like.
photo, the photo at the left on my screen is of Joan and me during her VSAD. I think it was the second day um, or the third, where she was reading a book aloud to all of us. The one on the right is a younger Joan. That picture is in one of the books that she wrote. We can look at some more slides if you want. Oh yeah, this is when our puppy Lucy was just barely a dog and not a puppy. So it was about maybe 12 years ago. And we were on vacation in the warm weather. I still have Lucy.
Yes, we've gotten to meet Lucy, which has been fun. Oh, okay. And then Gothoe, did you want to kind of wrap up and talk about how to get the book?
I would be happy to do so, Ali. Thank you everyone so much for participating in this. Fran, Carol, Dr. Z, Ali, thank you for guiding us through this. If you, like I know I am, have been touched by Fran's story, you can hear so much more in her book, Herself to the End, which is available for purchase as a Kindle ebook. But if you're also like me and prefer a physical paper copy, please reach out to Broadside Bookshop. There's an email associated there, roxy@broadsidebooks.com, and you can also call them at 413-586-4235 to actually purchase the book. Now, we're so excited to share so many resources with you. If you want to hear about any of the wealth of resources that we offer, please go to compassionchoices.org. We spent a lot of time today talking about VSED. There were a couple of questions in the chat about what VSED is, voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. And you can check out those resources at cnc.org/VSED. And it's set up in Q&A format, so you'll get a lot of great responses there. Now, finally, we're almost entirely funded by folks like yourself who take the time out of the day to learn about these, because these are so important as conversations. So if you appreciate today's content and want to help us sustain our work and keep having wonderful webinars like these, please consider making a donation today at compassionchoices.org/donate. No donation is too small. Every little bit helps, and we appreciate all of that. Finally, please connect with us on social media. We're on all major platforms, and we have wonderful events like this coming up. We have another event next week at 4 p.m. Eastern with an award-winning filmmaker talking about another woman's experience with medical aid and dying. And you can check out a complete list of our events at cnc.org/events. Now, I want to just thank again Ali for moderating this wonderful conversation, Fran for writing this book, sharing the story, and really bringing us into what it's like to go through this with a partner. Carol for sharing your insight as well, and Dr. Z for grounding us in what VSAD actually is. We'll stick around for a couple of minutes if folks want to put more questions in the chat. As we mentioned before, this has been recorded. It'll be available and emailed out to all of you tomorrow, as well as available on our YouTube channel. We're Compassion Choices at YouTube. But just thank you so much, all of you, for being here. We really appreciate you spending the time in your afternoon with us.